Maybe he'll be mayor of New York one day. I don't know. But he's here today to talk about basic income and a host of other things that he's working on. Let me welcome back to the show our pal, Mr. Andrew Yang.
Hello, Karen. Thank you for having me. It's
Thanks for,
great to be here
thank you.
again. I feel like I'm coming home.
Hey, you know what? That just gave me chills and made me feel really good inside. Thank you for that. You are home, sir. You are. Um, I've had your mind. You've been on my mind since the last time you were on. But the 11 mayors throughout the country who signed this letter about basic income, and then we're seeing another stimulus possibly come down the pike. And I was like, if they had just done the basic income thing that Andrew Yang was running on, maybe this wouldn't be such a horrific time to be here in this country.
You're 100% right, Karen, where unfortunately now we're in like this pandemic fueled recession that could become a depression, and we need to get money into people's hands. So I've been doing my best to both make that case to members of Congress. There's an emergency cash relief bill that literally 74% of Americans support that's getting money into our hands. Can you think of something else 74% of Americans support at this point? Like, what do you have to do to try and like, get that higher? Majority
Life,
of
maybe?
Republicans and Democrats. So let's talk some sense into our legislators and get economic relief into our hands. I wish it didn't have to be like in this tragic and devastating a time, but it's overdue.
Well, Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, just announced that he's donating $3 million to those mayors. I think the mayor in California, Stockton, has been doing it successfully. So he was one of the leading ones. Chokwe Lumumba, Keisha Lance Bottoms. There's a bunch of mayors all over the
Ross
country,
Baraka,
particularly.
yeah, a bunch of
Yes.
people. I was on a panel with Mayor Tubbs of Stockton last year, and he said something to me. I'm probably not supposed to share it, but I'll share it because, whatever, we're here. But he said to me after the panel, he said, like, Andrew, you can say shit I could never get away with saying. Where,
Okay.
but, like, and what he meant by that was that, like, I was just up there being like, look, we have to value people intrinsically. We have to give everyone a basic income and the rest of it. And last year he was like, if a young black mayor were to say that, like, people would be like, what the heck are you talking about? He's like, but now it's not just him. It's Keisha Lance Bottoms. It's Ross Baraka in Newark. It's mayors around the country. And there are going to be many more. Because if you're a mayor and you see what's happening in your community, you're going to say, like, wait a minute, like, we need to do things differently.
So tell me what the disconnect is. And I've watched it around welfare. I've watched it. There's like this notion in this country that if we give somebody something, that somehow it takes something away from me. And so it is a weird thing. But I literally watched the government print money, trillions of dollars, and give it to people. And no one had a problem with it. And I'm like, oh, so we could just print money and just give it to people?
We could have been doing it the whole time, Karen. Like, that's the brutal truth. And Martin Luther King saw this in the 60s. He was like, we should have a basic income today. And he was killed while he was making that case. And somehow we've been brainwashed into this nonsense myth that, like, oh, we don't have enough to go around. It's been nonsense for a long time. And this pandemic has demonstrated to all of us, when push came to shove, like you just said, did we just print $4 trillion for Wall Street when they needed a bailout? Yes. Did we just print $4 trillion for big companies and to some extent ourselves, like during this pandemic? Yes. We can do it. We just need enough members of Congress to get on board with the fact that they work for us. They don't work for Amazon. They don't work for the giant companies that have been laughing their way all the way to the bank for the last number of years and decades.
When you were talking about universal basic income, during the election cycle, et cetera, I was always wondering, like, where there are other places that have actually made it work. And you'd given a couple of examples. Like, even I saw recently that you had tweeted about South Africa is on its way to creating a floor for universal income, right? Talk about where the rest of the world is on this, because I think it's such a foreign concept to so many Americans that they think it's not possible, right? But there are precedents for this, like literally in places throughout the world.
Yeah, South Africa just announced that they're going to make it happen for everyone. India is actually implementing a version of it to tens, hundreds of millions of people. Canada, they did like a full-on UBI trial in an entire town for years. And in that town, you saw better health, mental health, more people starting businesses, more people going back to school. It was beautiful. And when they found that data, they were like, this is exactly what we should have been doing this entire time. Like, the data is like Indiana Jones, you know, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where like the data was like it's a prefix like warehouse or file cabinet, where people were trying to keep it from public eye. But then when they found it, they were like, oh my gosh. So there, like you said, there are examples of this happening around the world. And the most compelling example, I think, tens of millions of Americans just experienced is like everyone got $1,200, and everyone liked it, loved it. Like it didn't make anyone all of a sudden be like, oh, like work is for like losers or something.
Yeah. And the government didn't shut down because you gave its citizens their money back, right? Like government didn't stop because we gave citizens some of their money back.
Yeah,
actually just the opposite. Right.
Yeah, and it helped the economy greatly. It like reduced the poverty rate, but it also went back right into local businesses, to groceries, to fuel, to rent. And we are the citizens and the stakeholders of the richest society in the history of the world. Like $22 trillion pre-crisis. We could 100% afford this. Dr. King knew it in the 60s. He was like, we can afford this now. He was right then. It's even more true today than it was then.
It's just so baffling that there's so much resistance, and it's always around this notion of laziness, this myth of laziness that will somehow, lull people into not getting up and pulling themselves up by their bootstrap. We're talking with two Andrews, Andrew McCaskill, of course, and Andrew Yang. You also are out talking about police reform and cash relief. Talk a little bit about what it is you're proposing, Andrew Yang.
On the police reform side of things, I looked at the data because I'm a data guy, Karen, and the data is shocking, where you're seeing cities around the country pay out over $1 billion a year in civil suits for police misconduct and brutality. And the legal standard to successfully sue a police officer is very high. So if you're seeing successful suits at over $1 billion a year, you know that the magnitude of the problem is multiple billions of dollars. And this is literally bankrupting some towns where some cop does something reprehensible, and then the entire police department gets. Now, at this point, you have to look at it and say this is a rampant problem, and it's like many of the problems we're talking about has been in place for years. And when I talked to a Black Lives Matter activist about this, he actually hit the nail on the head. He said, look, local DAs cannot control cops in their area, because if you're the DA in that area, you literally rely upon law enforcement every day just to do your job and make cases. And then for you to turn around and being like, hey, bad cops, like, we're going to bust you all. Like the local DAs, like Kamala Harris, she said the same thing. She was like, you can't expect the locals to do this. So what I proposed was that you need a federal Department of Justice commission that ideally be named after George Floyd, that all their mission was to investigate issues around police misconduct. And if you're a local DA, you would celebrate, because finally it would be something that's off your plate. And you know that there are issues, you know there are bad cops in your area, but you can't do much about it. And then you can just say, look, like, give it to the feds, and then the feds come in. Like, it's the only way that you would actually be able to address this issue, in my opinion, around the country in a real way that would actually stand up over time.
Unfortunately, the feds right now is a Trump administration fed. And so there's no appetite there to actually do this with this current administration.
We've never had a Department of Justice this disinterested in justice.
Yeah, they might want to rename themselves, or you go with like a new one that actually gets after the people's work. There are a lot of other things that we should do. I mean, a lot of the things in the Democrats' bill were spot on around banning chokeholds and getting data. Like, one problem is that if you have a bad cop, that cop can just go 3 counties over and all of a sudden get hired again. It's a situation where you actually aren't even sure the magnitude of the problem. It's one reason I went looking for the data, because police departments don't actually report how many people die in contact with police officers every year, even though they're legally required to do so, which it's a terrible problem if like no one even knows how bad the problem is. Like that's a terrible, terrible sign in just about any environment. So there's so much work to do on this side, Karen. Certainly, I think cash relief is part of this too. And I said that would George Floyd have been there in that situation if everyone was getting $1,000 or $2,000 a month? I think that there was some issue around him needing to pay for something and people suspected the currency, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just get real money in everyone's hands and then make it so that fewer people of color are having run-ins with a police for everyday interactions or issues.
As you sit home now and watch as we trip into November, you're no longer running. You endorsed Joe Biden, but I don't think it's a cakewalk. I don't think it's going to be a runaway. I think it's going to be a very difficult victory, and I actually am nervous about whether or not he could pull this out. Have you been having conversations with him about the person he selects as vice president, which I think is going to be probably the most important vice presidential pick in our history? What's going to be your role in a Biden administration? Because there should be one. And give us something to hold on to, Andrew Yang, in terms of what you see happening in November regarding this election.
I talked to Joe last week, and I'm really very, very positive on his chances of becoming our next president. And again, I'm the numbers guy where, the polls let us down in 2016, but the polls are pretty freaking uniform this time around, and they're even more extreme than they were last time. I think Hillary had a point in maybe a 4-point lead. Joe's lead is something like twice that, and the lead holds up in places like Florida and Michigan. According to the polls, Texas is up for grabs. You got to look up and say, if you're the average American who voted for Donald Trump, are you eager to sign up for 4 more years of this? You're seeing your economy shot to pieces. You're seeing people dying. You're seeing him just inflame racial problems instead of trying to heal them. Even the average Trump voter has to look around and being this is not good. 72% of Americans said that this is the worst time in American history that they can ever remember. So that's 72%. You know what I mean? I don't know what the other 28% of people are. Maybe they're really old and they remember something very, very, very awful. But if 72% of Americans think you're in the worst time in American history in their lifetimes, that's not let's reelect the current president. That's a very, very anti-incumbent type atmosphere. So I think Joe wins. But then after Joe wins, the work begins. We have so much work to do. We have to reinvent this economy so that it works for everyone listening to this, for families and towns that are being shattered right now. And I will be part of the administration if Joe wants me to be. One of the things that they have floated by me is to try and address our data rights and technology issues, things that the government, frankly, is way behind on. And Joe has expressed some openness and enthusiasm for trying to build up some kind of tech-facing team, and I may be part of that team.
As it relates to that, when I think about how far advanced other parts of the world are in terms of protecting the privacy of individuals, particularly as it relates to our privacy from our tech providers, put it into perspective what we sort of are giving away without any modicum of regulation here, or without legislators who really understand technology.
We're giving away in dollar terms hundreds of billions of dollars a year. If you look at Facebook and Google, Facebook's revenue is $70 billion a year. Google's $160 billion a year. That's almost 100% advertising. And so they're making all that money based on selling and reselling our data to advertisers. And we all have had the experience where you leave Facebook and the ads follow you around. You have some kind of Facebook conversation about a beach vacation, and all of a sudden, Aruba ads are being shown to you, when you're on a totally different site. So that's eerie and spooky. And number one is we're not seeing a dime of that. If our data is worth $200 billion a year plus, why are we not seeing a red cent? So that's messed up. The fact that our preferences and opinions are subject to so much of this interference, some of it which may be corrupt or even foreign or ideologically extreme, like that's a mess. The fact that our mental health is actually diminishing, particularly for young people, particularly for young girls, in part because of the way that social media incentives are set up, where, and I use social media a lot, Yang Gang and all of that. But the fact is that if you're the social media company, you get paid based upon trying to advertise to us. And so everything you do is going to be designed to try and maximize engagement and snap streaks and the rest of it. And so if you're a 14-year-old girl and, you're getting cyberbullied or whatnot, or being subject to various negative influences, like there's no counterweight within that tech company to try and look out for our kids. It's all about what the advertisers want, like how they can make the most money. So it's bad for our sense of self, our humanity, our pocketbooks and wallets, our democracy, and our mental health, what's going on right now with our data. And I would love to turn that around. I'm working on things right now to try and turn that around, but I think the Biden administration is going to move light years faster.
Andrew Yang is with us here on the Karen Hunter Show. As I'm listening to you, again, I'm lamenting, man, it would be nice. And if you live in New York, as Drew does from time to time, I'm wondering if you are going to throw your hat. Are you going to announce on this show today that you're going to be running for mayor of New York? I'm just curious.
I love the question, just in that, like, it's incredibly invigorating to be considered for it. Right now, I'm focused on helping Joe win, get Trump out, like get a new team in D.C., and then we'll look at the opportunities for me in terms of how to have a positive impact. But I love New York. I certainly want to see New York back on its feet as soon as possible.
And on that, you're a father. You're raising kids in New York. There's this drumbeat from the president to send kids back into the classroom, or else funding will be withheld. What are your thoughts on that as somebody that also has children in the New York City school system?
Yeah, I have conversations with my wife about this on the regular, as we are all having within our households. And there is real truth to the fact that, like, there are, a million different situations around the country, and there are real harms to not having your kids in school. Like, we all saw the beginnings of it with our kids being out in the spring. And if you have that at-home time compound in the fall, like, some of these kids will be significantly behind, and their development will be, less than what you want it to be. Now, that's one side of the equation. What is the other side? Like, how safe do people feel? Like, if you send your kids into school, like, are you confident really that, in my case, like 7-year-olds are going to social distance from each other? Of course not. They're kids. Like, the odds of them all, like, wearing masks and staying like 6 feet away from each other are approximately zero. So you have to look at that on the other side and say, okay, like, what are the health concerns? Where are the teachers on this? And teachers are going to be obviously mixing with these kids on the on the regular, and so that there are real massive issues to balance. It's not like a black or white or right or wrong thing in my mind, because there are so many different situations for different kids, different families, different communities. If you're in a part of the country where, frankly, COVID is not rampant and your kids need school, then ideally your school does reopen and your kid's back in that school. If you're in a community where COVID is spreading like wildfire and hospitals don't have capacity, then it's a very, very different picture. I'm happy to say it seems like New York now is edging towards being one of the clearer environments, because we've taken it seriously, because we had to pay such a tragic, devastating price early on.
Yeah, but it also, there's no cure yet. And so you can be clear today and not tomorrow. 14 days later, there could be another wave. So and on that, this president took the opportunity to constantly refer to this virus as the China virus or the Wuhan flu and things like that. And as a man with an Asian background, what were your thoughts, and what was he trying to do, and what was the impact of the fallout from that?
I was talking to a family member about this. Like, Trump's like a basketball player who has one move, and then like you take the move away, he doesn't know what else to do. He just keeps going to it. So in his case, it's like my move is racially inflammatory and divisive rhetoric. And if I'm getting called to task for the fact that I've let this pandemic run rampant and wreck the economy and kill tens of thousands of Americans, maybe if I call it the China virus or Kung flu or like Wuhan flu or whatever, like I can like change the conversation and just like make it so that people are angry at each other or distracted. So from my perspective, it's like, look, let's just like focus on the real issues that we all care about, which is our health, our family's health, whether our kids are going to go back to school, and like keep the focus on the fact that this administration has failed us in historic mammoth fashion. So clearly, as an Asian American, obviously, I think that kind of stuff is nonsense and hateful and divisive. But I just don't want it to work. Like, just to like keep the focus on the president's performance, and then we'll get him out of there, and then we can start to heal the country and do the hard work of digging ourselves out.
It would be nice to ignore it, but there were people that were actually, abused, attacked as a result of this. So,
I have friends too. I mean, like the hatred and fear and hostility towards Asian Americans has surged to a level that, friends and family have never seen before. And like, kids being stabbed and like people being beaten, like and acid being thrown in someone's face randomly, like, just real venom and hatred that has no place in America. It's heartbreaking, and like the thing I try and put back in perspective, it's like, well, I mean, you also have African Americans dying of COVID at like 3, 4, 5 times the rate of other Americans. I mean, like we're all suffering in different ways. And, like to me, like the goal has to be try and do as much good as possible and get us out and not let certainly President Trump distract us from what's most important.
All right. So now what? I wait until November. I just feel on some level not helpless because, as long as we have breath in our body, we can make a difference, whether we're talking about our community and in our own backyard. But it does feel like it's a waiting game to November to see what happens, because as long as that man is in office, pardoning folks guilty, abusing the power that he has been imbued with, and it's disgusting, as a student of history, to watch this man abuse that office in this manner. I just feel like we're in a holding pattern until November.
Oh, Karen, there's so much for us to do between now and then. Certainly, number one is some of these local races. Like I was excited for Jamal Bowman. I'm excited for some of the folks that my organization's endorsing right now. We got a primary tomorrow on Tuesday in Austin, Texas. This great candidate, Donna Imam, is running that I endorse. So like literally like every week there's like another race that I'm like trying to pump energy and resources and votes towards. There's another candidate who just came out as a mayor for universal basic income, Alex Morse in Massachusetts, who's great, freaking brilliant guy, is for basic income. So if we can get some folks into D.C., one of the things, so we started this conversation on emergency cash relief, which I'm clearly 100% behind. And to me, how can you be a member of Congress who's a Democrat and not be for cash relief? You need to go. And we need to get someone in there who will actually say, like, look, during a pandemic, giving money to people is obvious. So Right now, 41 representatives and like a smaller number of members of Congress, including Kamala Harris and Bernie and Ed Markey, support the cash relief bill. And one of the ways we can get cash relief passed is by having members of Congress who are not for cash relief have challengers come up and say, I'm for cash relief. Why the heck are you not for cash relief? And then you either get the current member out and a new person in who's for cash relief, or you put pressure on the current person to switch. And so that, to me, is like job one right now, is we got to call our members of Congress and say, look, you're going to pass another stimulus bill, which they will. I guarantee another stimulus bill is coming. You got to get more of it for the people, for us, for the human. We do not care about the megacorps. They can go into bankruptcy for all we care. Like, I care about myself, my aunt, my friends, my neighbors. Get us the money. And so we need to make that case. And one great way to make that case is by like supporting people who are for it. and if you're not for it, you need to go. So that's immediate. Another thing that we can do is just lend a hand. Like, thanks to some people like Jack Dorsey, like my organization's given almost $7 million in direct economic relief, including $1 million straight to 1,000 families in the Bronx earlier in the spring. I can't believe it's summer now. That's crazy. So we need to just lend a hand because there's so much suffering, so many people, and we can't wait until DC gets its act together. Like, we just got to do everything we can to put people on a better path. When we've been giving this $250 or $500 or $1,000 to people, Karen, tears of joy. You know, it's like, it's incredibly invigorating and saddening at the same time that there's so many Americans that if you gave them $500, it would be like the difference between eating and not eating, or being able to feed their kids and not feed their kids. So anything we can do to help on that side, we should do. And for what it's worth, Andrew,
tell people how to participate in that.
Oh, I would love that. So our organization's website is movehumanityforward.com. We've given $7 million in direct economic relief. Any money you give to us, we're going to turn around and give to someone in need. And yeah, hopefully we can get up to that $10 million level pretty quick. But the need is so vast. You can also request help at that website. So if when you're listening to this and you need a hand, you can put your name down. It's pretty quick. We do have a massive waiting list now, so no promises. But if you need help, please do just put your name down. And if you can provide help, give what you can, and we'll turn it around and give it to someone else.
I'm curious what you think about some of the large corporations that are now starting to pledge dollars to communities. Particularly, I'm thinking about the dollars pledged to the African American community, or racial or social justice, or even some of the organizations, some of the corporations that are pledging dollars toward COVID, their COVID response. What would you advise those companies where to spend that money, how to actually make that money meaningful, or what should we be looking for, asking for from those organizations as they're saying we're going to give these dollars, we're going to make these donations and these checks? What should we be looking for or asking them to do with that money?
I'm a huge fan of direct relief. Like if the money was going straight into people's wallets and pocketbooks, that would be ideal. I like it when firms stand up and try and do the right thing. They say, like, hey, look, I'm going to give $5 million to communities of color. I've been in those offices, and you know what they do when they're in this situation? They look around and say, okay, who can we give the money to that will stand up to like a very, very high degree of corporate scrutiny or press scrutiny? And then they'll try and identify various nonprofits that are reputable and can be trusted. And then maybe if you have $5 million to give to communities of color, you say, look, find me the 5 top nonprofits that are working on various issues and give them each $1 million each. You have press releases. Those leaders are happy. Great. Love it. How much of that money ends up reaching folks who are desperate right now for groceries and the rest of it? Probably not quite as much as you'd hope, and then not to be mad at anything that's going on. Like, I run a nonprofit that I started. If you gave us $1 million, we'd be incredibly grateful. We'd do great stuff with it. We'd pay our people first, obviously, because, it's not like these nonprofits are swimming in resources necessarily all the time. So, some good work would be done, but there'd be a lot of people that would never see a dime of that. And so it's a different type of challenge. But if you're a company, you feel like you got to go to a name brand partner.
Drew and I have been having this conversation just about every week because we know what you just said is true. And we need to do more of what you're actually doing. Move humanity forward. MoveHumanityForward.com, or is it .org?
It's .org, but it probably gets to the same place.
Okay.
It's
right.
MoveHumanityForward.com, I think. I don't even know. I think it's a .com.
Try both of them.
We got them both.
Yeah. That's spot on. So, Andrew, first of all, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you. We appreciate the partnership. You're a guy that really does care about people, and that's important to us here, just in general, because everyone is so political Everything's so political. Everything's about, putting on the right face and saying the right things and having the right sound bites. You actually do care. That was what you ran for president on, and you're still doing it. So I'm really grateful that you're part of this family here.
Thank you, Karen. I'm grateful to you for having me on back when I was running. Now I'll come back anytime. And we just have to do what's right for us and our people. We know, like, if you talk to the average person, they know how to solve their own problems best. We just got to get money into your hands so you can actually solve your own problems. When we were looking to give $1 million away to the folks in the Bronx, I was like, we have to make it so every dime goes to a human. I do not want to be, again, not mad at nonprofits, run one, but we got to, find 1,000 people and give them $1,000. And we did it. And I was very, very proud of that. We need more like that, where we just got to get money into people's hands. And remember Congress, this is the only silver lining, Karen. We're in a deep, dark hole. It's a terrible, catastrophic time. But there's a huge appetite to do something differently. Again, 74% of Americans want cash relief. We're going to get President Biden, and then we're going to need a new deal, and it's going to be hopefully a chance to right some of the wrongs that have been weighing our country down for generations.
Elections have consequences, people. You got to vote. You got to take care of business. And Andrew Yang, you come back anytime, sir. Appreciate you. Follow him.
You so much.
Yang Gang.
Hi, Andrew.
Shout out to y'all.